Hello friends and my dear students. Last time we discussed plus equal operator while concatenation the list and tuples, and this time I am going to discuss very important function, that is ID. So what is ID? So this is basically, it returns the address. This is a function which returns the address of the memory location storing a specified value or pointed to by the variable, right? So it returns the address of the memory location storing a specified value or pointed to by a variable. So for example, if I have the list of variables like A, B, C, D and E, if you see variable A holds value 10, that is the integer, and suppose uh, it resides in address 100 in the memory. So it means the address of integer 10 is 100. So whenever we use A, so A will fetch its value from address 100. So its ID should be 100. Well, ID of variable A should be 100. Similarly, if B has the value hello, so a string, and suppose its address in the memory is 200, so ID of B is 200. Similarly, if you see C is a variable holding the integer, since this is the same integer, so its address should be the same. Its ID will be the ID which A possesses, the ID C will also possess the same address in the memory. Similarly, when you come to D, D is a list, and suppose its memory location is 300, means when you create a create a list, it occupies some space in the memory, and the address of that memory at location is 300, right? And if there is another variable like E, and if it holds a string, the same string, it means its address location should be the same, ID should be the same. So over here, if you see, the ID of E is 200 and the ID of B is also 200. But if you see the ID of this list 10 and 20, so its address location is 300, and when you create another list, say 10 and 20, its address location is 400. So over here you must note that these two items, means D and F, having different memory locations, whereas ID of A is 100 and ID of C is also 100. Yes, so and if you want to see the ID of B, hello, the ID of B will be 200 and the ID of E will also be 200. But the ID of list D is 300, and the same values in the list which is pointed to by variable F will have ID 400. So these are the fictitious addresses which I have taken, but in actual I'll show you on Python interface, Python ideally, I'll show you the same. So what happens when you say print ID of A, it should print 100. When you say print ID of B, it should print 200. When you say print ID of C, what is C? C is again 10. So its ID should be 100, like A. Now next is D. This is a list. When you say D is a list, 10 and 20 are the values in that list and its ID is 300. And you must know that the list is a mutable character. The list is mutable object, and that is why the IDs of different lists can be changed. So if D1020 purchases address location 300, definitely F, the list which also has 10 and 20, will purchase different memory location. So here 10 is not mutable, and that is why its address is 100. So 10 is not mutable, its address is 100. Hello is a string, it is not mutable, not mutable, immutable. So its address is 200. Same here, E is hello and its address is 200. This is also immutable. But the list D and F are mutable, and that is why their IDs are different. Okay, so let's see, do the practical. So when you come to the practical, this is and suppose I'm just squeezing this. And suppose A is 10. Okay, then see its ID. What is the ID of A? So this is the ID. And if you say B is 10, and if you want to find out the ID of B, again the IDs are the same ID, because value is similar. This is an integer and this is immutable. Okay, and that is why their IDs are the same. Similarly, if you take C as hello, when you find out the ID of C, this is the ID, and when you take another variable D is equal to say hello, its ID would be the same. See here, the ID of C and ID of D, these IDs are same. But if you see, if I take X is equal to 10, 20, this is a list, and if you find the ID of this, ID of X, this gives ID or the memory location is this. And when you take another list like Y is equal to with the same values 10, 20, and this time ID of Y should be different. See here, ID of X is this and ID of Y is this. So when objects are mutable, IDs would be different and immutable, and the same values, then IDs would be the same. Hope you understand the concept. And next, append function. An append function, this applies to the list structure or list type. So it is a method that adds an object or element to the end of the list. So whichever element is in the list, if you add any other element, then it will be added to the bottom or in the end of the list. So this is the function of append. Okay, just see the example of this. Suppose A is equal to a list 1, 2, B is 5, is integer, C is 3 5 again a list, D is hello, this is a string, E is 5.6, this is float. When you apply append, means if you apply A append B, A append B, it should give what? 1, 2, 5. 1, 2, 5. When you say since 1, 2, 5, the values or the list has come from A append B. Now, if you apply A dot append C, so now the current value of A is 1, 2, 5, and new value C when appended, and 3, 5 is again an object. Now this object will be added to the end of the list. So when you add this or when you append the list, so list is another object and A is also an object. So this object is added to A in next object or other object. So when you see append A dot append C and you say print A, it will append the new object like 1, 2, 5 and 3, 5. This is another object. So you must note this. When you append the list, it will be added as an another object to the previous list. And likewise, if you append D to it, 1, 2, 5, 3, 5, when you append D, that is hello, and when you say print A, now this will become 1, 2, 5, 3, 5, and hello is appended to the end of the list. So the list shape will be like this after append of D. And in the last, if you append 5.6, so what will happen? The 5.6 will be appended to the end of this list A. So let's see. So you will see this will look like this. Okay. So here you see the elements, whether they are iterable or non-iterable, are appended to the list. So what the next function is? Extend. It is a method that extends a list by an iterable objects. Note it, iterable object. Means the list is iterable, tuple is iterable, string is also iterable, but integer is not iterable, character is not iterable. So the object which you see these are iterables, then you can extend with the list. So see here, example. Suppose A is a list 1, 2, B is 5. See here, 1, 2, this is a list, this is iterable, but 5 is immutable, this is not iterable. But this is list, it is iterable. Hello is a string collection of characters, so this is iterable, but 5.6 is constant or immutable, and that is why this is non-iterable object. So if you apply extend here, if you apply A dot extend B, since B is integer which is not iterable, and that is why this function will not be performed, so it will not give any output. But over here, if you see A dot extend C, so A is iterable 1, 2, C is also iterable 3, 5, and that is why this function will not be performed. And when you see this, so iterable values are extended like this: 1, 2, this is a list, 3, 5 is another list. So unlike append, this will extend the list. So 1, 2, and the next element will be 3 comma 5, right? Then again A extend D, so D is hello. This is again iterable, means you can apply loop on hello. So it means hello is the string which is the collection of characters. So if you apply this, this will give you, or this will extend the list. So 1 2 3 5 was in previous attempt extended list, and this time also when you extend the previous list by hello, then the result list will be 1 2 3 5 HELLO. So this way this list is extended. In the end, when you extend this by adding the value 5.6, this is float. So A dot extend, since this is not iterable, and that is why it will give you the error. So let's move to interface, Python interface. Over here, loading Python. Yes, this is here. I'm taking A is 1 comma 2, this is iterable, and B is 5, this is not iterable, non-iterable value. So when you say A dot extend B, so this will give the error because B is not iterable. See here, integer is not iterable. So iterable object is A, but B is not the iterable object. Similarly, if you take C as hello, and if you apply extend here, A dot extend C, this will be executed. And when you say print A, this will give you like this. So this hello is iterable. We take another value, D is equal to 5.6. This again non-iterable. So when you say A dot extend D, and this time it will give you the error. So hope you understand the difference between append and extend, and you should know the concept of ID. Why should we use ID when you are going to discuss the location of any value in the memory? ID function is used, so ID gives the address of the particular value or pointed to by the variable. So hope you understood the concept which I explained today, and if you understand the concept, kindly share it with your friends, and like the video and share it with your friends and people. So we'll meet in the next video. Till then, bye bye.